A very good day to everybody. We're so excited to be able to provide a small example and some more information on some very key topics that are within the sports science realm and the wider performance department's minds when we refer to high performance sport across various teams. Today, we would like to discuss, along with everybody here, the concept of the acute chronic workload ratio. And during our presentation, we will be able to first explore what is comprised of human performance, the various personas that may be found or may comprise a high performance team, departments, and of course, then explore in a little further detail the methods of calculation of the acute chronic workload ratio, in addition to another high performance tool that is also available in the WIMU Cloud for all our customers to be able to evaluate how the training load is being received or how the athletes are responding to the training load prescribed. First off, we would today like to explore in a little greater detail what the concept of human performance is, an area that Hudl has now invested in to provide a solution to its current customers, namely through the WIMU wearable solution. Human performance is, as you can see here, has quite a few distinct pillars that mold together to form what we know today as human performance. So there is a physical component to the athlete's performance. So this can be gym sessions, this can be optimal training design to ensure that they are able to compete and train at the desired or at the highest level as requested or needed from their sport of preference where they compete. Mental toughness, so the psychological aspect, the ability to, I would say, respond, withstand, and be able to maintain the training and competition load during a full season. That would be one example. The technical skill, of course, how we are able to perform sport-specific movements that are fundamental to our sport technique would fall under this area. Nutrition, sleep, recovery, again, these are quite closely linked. And what is also important to share is that there is, I would say, quite an abundance of options from these various pillars to rely or to use the WIMU data to properly prepare the physical fitness, the recovery of our athlete after a match or a training session. And that's what I also want to share with you as we progress further in our presentation. Here, as we can see, an example of a high-performance workflow. We can see the various quadrants or pillars that comprise high-performance workflows. Today, we'll be looking at the areas and alluding, of course, to the areas of player monitoring, of recovery, how the load of the athlete and the training load specifically is designed or properly monitored by a high-performance team to ensure that the athlete's ability to compete and train is maintained at the highest level. And of course, as we progress, areas of injury management are areas that are also able to be, I would say, catered to through the application and the use of the WIMU Pro system. Within high-performance workflow, we have identified how human performance personas within a club, within a professional sport team. As we can see here, it spans from a sports director, a head of performance, sports scientist, the doctor, the medical team, physiotherapist, a nutritionist, and of course, the head coach. In this case, there is a piece of WIMU data for each persona, as we can see here on our screen. If we try to take a step back and just take a moment to assess how WIMU can help, the output of WIMU, namely through the WIMU Cloud and the dashboards, can very well assist for those key decisions that are driven or devised by a sports director implementing the philosophy or the vision of a club. Of course, the output, as we're talking of upwards of 250 variables from the WIMU device, can also assist the head of performance, the sports scientist, the doctor, the physiotherapist, of course, the nutritionist, and of course, it goes without saying, the head coach. And we are seeing this evolution of how the WIMU data is finding a home in various departments grow day by day. And that is just one more testament to the flexibility of the system to be able to support such diverse needs across a club, as we can see here on our screen. I wanted to include this element also, or this component of performance, to give you an idea of where the subject matter we are talking about today, namely the acute chronic workload ratio, can actually be calculated, can actually be visualized within our workflow. So in this case, having prepared the devices and analyzing the data, for example, during a match, as we see on the top of our figure, those images, the acute chronic workload ratio is calculated, namely in the WIMU Cloud. So that means that once we have been able to download the data, in our example today, after the match, as we can see on the lower part of our diagram, then the output of the acute chronic workload ratio is visualized in the WIMU Cloud. And our product team has worked tirelessly, as we will see later in our presentation, in order to provide multiple options of how to visualize the output of the acute chronic workload ratio, and of course, additional ways, which we will look at later, of how to be able to also evaluate the training response of our athletes using other methods. What I also want to reiterate is, as we can see here, this is just let's say a snippet, a small example of the various personas, once again, that can actually use, take advantage, act upon the insights provided through the WIMU Cloud, again, along with the themes that we spoke about earlier. And in this case, of course, the acute chronic workload ratio as a calculation can provide that insight that perhaps the team or the staff is keen on exploring to actually evaluate how the athlete is fit to train, again, for example, after a match. What is also fundamental to the tracking system, in this case, the WIMU Pro system, is how we are able to provide solutions through customer collaboration, which means evaluating requests, exploring the feasibility of how we can actually embed or include client feedback. And today, I'm very excited to show you those examples or those outputs or those results that are now readily available through the WIMU Cloud that were once an idea or a discussion with a customer, and now they are widgets or they are calculations that are available today, and the common denominator is always with the press of a button. So it's as easy as we can make it humanly possible for our customers to extract the insights that they need. To start off, again, with the acute chronic workload ratio, it can be a way, for example, or an index or a ratio to actually compare what an athlete has done or what a team has done in a very short or recent period of time. Think of that as the acute workload, compared or divided by the workload of the chronic period of time. So perhaps a week or a few days before our latest session. So we are comparing the most recent, so the acute, to what has been happened previously, which would be the chronic. And we can see here that this is visualized on our screen. We have our bar graph, our line graph also. And as you can see, the background of our actual graph here has the analysis of both the acute and chronic. And this is exactly what our customers are using and benefit from when they consult this, I would say, this calculation. Of course, this calculation is also designed to evaluate the preparedness of our athletes to train. And of course, to identify or to explore if they are in a fitness or fatigue phase dependent or in relation to the output, which in this case would be the ratio of each individual athlete. And what's more, in the WIMU Cloud, we are able to calculate the acute chronic workload ratio for any metric that is provided within the system. So that allows an array of options for our customers to choose perhaps the applicable metric for their specific sport or for the specific insight that they're looking or keen to receive from the system. Again, as a concept and as a calculation, it is also helpful to explore how it is calculated in the system. The WIMU Cloud and the WIMU Pro system is using the exponentially weighted moving average to actually calculate the acute chronic workload ratio. In this case, as we can see, it is helpful in this case as it's applying a greater weighting factor to more recent metrics, or think more recent sessions, and a lower weighting factor to the previous sessions that have occurred. So that chronic phase again, circling back to that concept. Of course, each team or each sport can be, I would say, somewhat different in its training design. Let's think track and field as opposed to maybe football. Maybe the seasons differ, the preparation phases differ, the training design differs. So again, alluding to that, to our right, where we see the acute chronic workload periods, in this case, what we want to also share with all of you today, and of course, what the WIMU Hudl customers are able to use also are the various workload periods. 1 to 7 would be comparing, let's say, for example, today to 7 days prior. The next one, 3 to 7, is the 3 previous days to the last 3 days, for example, to the previous 7. And in the next part of the presentation, we'll actually also be able to comment on the concept of coupled and uncoupled, which I will allude to once we reach that part of the presentation. Some themes, as in why can we use these various workload periods? As an example, we might have a scenario where we might be in preseason. So in this case, it might hold true that in order for us to have, say, relatively immediate insight of the response to training, so the acute chronic workload ratio in this case, it might make more sense from an analysis standpoint to rely on periods of a shorter duration, meaning if I've just finished my first week of training, it might make sense, for example, to rely on the first one on our screen, so comparing today to the previous 7 days, as opposed to waiting for a longer period of time, say a week compared to the previous 4 weeks, to actually analyze your data. It might, for example, be too late then to actually evaluate the preseason. So what customers can do, they can freely choose which acute chronic workload period they want, and the output will be generated automatically within the WIMU Cloud. And again, as we can see here, or how we commented about how preseason may differ in season, for example, the concept of a congested match schedule, imagine we might have a scenario of games very frequently, one after the other. So with some terminology, we might say, I have match day, then I have a match day -1, match day, match day, match day -2, match day -1, match day. That will be considered a congested match schedule. Again, our customers would then be able to actually choose, do I want to focus the analysis of the acute chronic workload ratio on my congested match schedule and maybe use a model that over a smaller workload period of time, or do I want to use a acute chronic workload period over a longer period of time? And of course, I have included the various icons of the sports as we can see on our screen, because of course it goes without saying, this tool, this high performance tool, can be applied to any sport that we cater to and support as a solution, as a company, and of course, as a wearable tracking system. We alluded to briefly just moments ago about the various models or the various calculation models of the acute chronic workload time periods. 1/7 meaning today, for example, to the previous 7 days. So taking that example in mind, there's also the ability in the WIMU Cloud to cater or to support our customers into how they are able to calculate the acute chronic workload ratio. So taking it to the example, once again, of the 1/7, so what I did today compared to my previous 7 days as the chronic the chronic workload, here we have the option to actually use coupled or uncoupled. And what does that mean? In the case that a customer is applying or using the coupled acute chronic workload ratio, the 1/7 model would in fact include the acute portion, which is 1, in the previous 7 days, so in the chronic. The uncoupled acute chronic workload ratio is designed to separate both elements of the acute and chronic, which would mean in a 1/7 model, today's session, the acute component, would not be included or would not form part of the 7 previous days of the chronic workload. So this is the concept that, again, we provide our customers to choose if they wish to explore or use or apply the coupled or uncoupled workload ratios. Yet another example of how we try to be proactive, how we try to also support our customers' needs. The WIMU Cloud also has an acute chronic workload simulator. So trying to tie everything together that we spoke about earlier, in this case, should a customer have an athlete that might be in a return to train or return to play protocol? Should a customer want to plan the week ahead? In this case, we have built an acute chronic workload simulator with the methodology or the calculations that we just discussed earlier. And in this case, as we can see here to our right, where the values are in the lighter gray color, this is the latest session that we can use as a reference. So for example, let's say it's a Monday. We can then plan, as you can see, the preceding days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so on and so forth, with either changing the ratio, always keeping in mind that we have our reference, which is Monday in this case, that we cannot edit, but we can actually manipulate or change or include the fixed value of our variable and what that translates as a ratio for the acute chronic workload ratio, or conversely, edit the ratio and see what sort of fixed value or absolute value that will actually generate as for the metric that we want. The third step, so once we have activated the simulator, we are then able to actually plan the week ahead, so this portion of the diagram. The output is then visualized in this manner. And what's more, should a customer want to re-evaluate either the value of the ratio or the value of the actual metric, so the metric is in the bar, the lines we can see here are the actual acute chronic workload ratios. We can manipulate these, either move them upwards or downwards, which will have an immediate effect on the absolute value of the metric. And conversely, by moving, increasing or decreasing the bar, so the absolute value of the metric, that will also change the ratio. So should a customer want to plan a few days ahead, a week ahead, for example, we can also provide that, again, with a press of a button and the customer's in the driver's seat to actually generate the insight that they want for any variable that they want at a team or individual level, for example, at an athlete position, for example, athlete or team level. Here now, again, in the same spirit, now shifting towards the widgets. Our product teams are working tirelessly to develop solutions that will be very easy to implement or adopt from our customers. We are also trying to be as proactive as possible. And one example can be how certain customers or certain methodologies within a club support one way over another way to actually visualize the acute chronic workload ratio. As we can see on our screen, we are able to offer an abundance of solutions or options when it comes to the acute chronic workload ratio visualization. Should a customer not be so keen on using a bar graph, right, with a ratio superimposed over each bar, we also now offer the calculation in ratio format in the cells that actually are assigned to a specific player and, of course, to a specific date or session, depending on the structure of the dashboard. So we started off with the bar graph, as we can see here, and the line graph component, but we have now evolved and actually provided the ratio format of that value, the acute chronic workload ratio. And of course, as we can see here, we can also visualize it in a grid. So the colors, you might be curious, we are able to allow or provide the customer with the option to color, or I would say create ranges based on the value of the ratio. There is research that would allude to, let's say, the optimal zone of training sometimes can be between a ratio value of 0.8 to 1.2, 1.5. So in this case, a customer, any WIMU customer, can actually enter the configuration of these widgets and actually define or inform the widget that should the value be 0.8, you can actually highlight it the according color. Should the value be 1.2, you can highlight it with the corresponding or the preferred color that they used in this case in their methodology. So as we can see, both the Hudl product team, but also our software team, also the sports scientists are working tirelessly to be able to offer as many solutions possible for our very, I would say, our varied or diverse customer base across a variety of team, individual, Olympic sports, for example. We've spoken about the acute chronic workload ratio, but again, another testament to how flexible the WIMU Pro and the WIMU Cloud software is. We strive to provide our customers with as many options as they wish to use. In this case, should a customer maybe show or display a preference to the Z-score, which, as we can see here, is the number of standard deviations of value is from the mean. So we're looking at the mean of the, I would say, of the outcome of a training session based on a specific metric, for example, should that be the case. And then we can look at an individual level at how each player's output, right, or performance is translated in the Z-score with reference to the mean. As we can see here, the green number 1, that would be above the mean, -1 would be below the mean. So in this case, to try to tie everything together, not only do we offer the acute chronic workload ratio, but we also offer the Z-score as an additional high performance tool to be able to evaluate the training, monitoring performance of our athletes at an individual or team level. To summarize, our intention today has been to explore and discuss the factors of human performance that we saw a little earlier at the start of the presentation, how monitoring is able to enhance decision-making. So the output of the acute chronic workload ratio, the output of the Z-score has been designed to inform customers on the state of their athletes, if they're in a fitness or fatigue state, right, as we spoke about earlier. Of course, we strive to provide these high-performance tools that we just saw in order not only to provide our customers with the necessary information, but also to provide that individual insight at an athlete level. The WIMU Cloud is evolving to provide and to visualize these insights in the best possible manner, as we saw earlier with, I would say, the standard way to visualize the acute chronic, to then include the acute chronic grid, to give the customer the option of what they would like to actually use to visualize that insight. And of course, we saw just moments ago that the Z-score is also ever present should a customer have a preference or use the Z-score over the acute chronic workload ratio. Of course, voicing our customers' feedback and our customers' point of view, the fact that WIMU is able to provide such a flexible load monitoring output, as in we can adapt as best we can to our customers' needs, WIMU truly does it best. Thank you very much. Look forward to the next one.